We had a very nice response last week to uh, the note and making the music as it relates to painting. Um, Thank you for that, people. Appreciate that. One of them came from Douglas M, um, and it's going to be the subject of today's. But it says, "Thanks for the excellent explanation of the movement of realism toward and into impressionism. In a related sense, could you also explain the difference between searching for the truth and being accurate in impressionist use of the terms? It may be noteworthy." I like that, Douglas. Very good. You know how to tempt me. Sometimes terms like being accurate and search for the truth and all that sort of thing, they sort of set me up for failure. There's a certain amount of this that I can be glib about, and there's a certain amount of it that is sort of bigger than all of us. There's a way of looking at it that's, in a sense, hard to pin down. But so let's move into that. But for thanking first Adra B and Lauren K for your continuing and very generous contributions to the great cause, and also to Ollie. Thank you, Ollie. That was exotically extravagant. Ollie M. So so appreciate very much what you're what all of you have done, and what I know that this means a lot to you, and that's some of what was being said in the comments as well. So this return on investment, so to speak, to keep Mr. Producer in business and to keep his little child fed, I could do it that way and really be a tearjerker, right? He does more than just my stuff. He would be in trouble if he didn't. Um, all right, but let's review the question just again, and then what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about various aspects of this idea of, and I'm going to quote, and all I'm going to do through this whole thing is just quote Tarbell, Benson, and DeCamp. I probably have more of these guys. I'll think of them as I'm going along, but there's a limited amount of time you can do and justify it, putting into digging up old quotes and things like that. So if they come off the top of my head, that's where they're when they come in. All right. So, but I'm going to show you pictures too. It's going to be mostly a kind of a dedication to Benson, because Benson is now, we find through the advice to his daughters, is really, he's the big talker. He's the best conversation we have on Boston School thinking. Gamble isn't that guy. Gamble's a different person. Um, he's and so that's what we value, the work of Benson so much, the words of Benson so much. But so let's have another quick look at this. In a related sense, could you also explain the difference between the truth and being accurate in impressionist use of the term? So the truth and being accurate. When you're sitting around with Gamble, he would tell you to make a thing like. It was the first time I heard that, make it like. And there's a mercy, shall we say, in the term like. Being accurate, what is that? You know what I mean? What is that? Accurate, like, is this an accounting thing? And he would also point out, this isn't a question of right and wrong. Even the word correct is a little bit interesting. I like searching for the truth, and the idea of a search is very much in the wheelhouse of the Boston School guys. You'll see they're all doing that, and Tarbell in particular uses that term. He talks about the search. So let's just look at some stuff. Well, there'll be pictures. I'm doing this a slightly different look today, so enjoy. And if you're Rick, you're probably going to be in the car driving and enjoying without pictures. Hope you enjoy that, Rick. If I'm right about that. All right. So here too by Tarbell. These are a pair. They're a pendant set. Is sometimes the way they're referred to. I believe they're exactly the same size. They are in the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and they're superb. They're very similar in, excuse me, they're very similar in coloring. And in general, in the way, in the execution of them, the degree, the sort of the look, if you want to call it that. They're both a little tiny bit Vermeer-like, at least, and they very definitely feel Dutch. The right one in particular. But his comment, which I have just probably mashed here, I don't actually have the quote in front of me right now, but he mentioned that he would someday, toward the end of his life, he was saying to somebody that he would someday really like to make one truly like. And now we're talking about like and the likeness model, but to truly like, it sounds like he's painting what's in front of him, right? Doesn't it sound like that? And he really is struggling to get the relationships of the notes and the sizes of things and the angles and shall we say the drawing, the shapes of whatever, anything that relates to drawing, anything that relates to color, anything that relates to light and light effects. He wants to make one truly like in that, so much so that you could see why he would have set it up that way. And by the way, it's important to remember that these guys are, when they can, setting these up. They're like still lifes. So they're organized compositions. They're set in a certain light that's pleasing to them. The way objects are set in the page is just exactly like the way you think in terms of a still life. So, and then his job is to make it like, right? So accuracy, it's kind of a slippery word. It's not it doesn't belong in my mind. It doesn't quite belong in our world. And yet you look at these, and you wouldn't say they're inaccurate. These guys, the word plausible is a dangerous one, but these are but because we can't see the models in their actual situation, we can't see how like they are. But when you've been around painting a long time, you can tell when a guy has got it and he's seeing well. He's got good sense of form. His proportions are good. His values are good. All that stuff, and you can tell that that's pleasing. We value, by the way, over time we value, especially in Western art, we really value like. We value making it look like. You might say that we spent several hundred years making it more and more and more realistic. An interesting world we live in, isn't it? And there's nothing really different in what these guys are doing, except when you get to be an impressionist, the realism has suddenly expanded its possibilities, and it doesn't labor to be more realistic in the details. It appears to be more realistic in the what you'd call the atmospheric truth, the truth of the distances and all sorts of things, ways, the light, the color movements, all sorts of things. But if it's not set up beautifully, keep remembering that if it's not set up beautifully, why would you want to make it like? So many times you guys have asked me, well, you go out to paint something and it's not good, doesn't look good. I don't know what in the world that thing is right there. And it doesn't look good. I always ask you, why would you be painting on it? And so they say, well, so they go out there and paint something they don't, and only half like, and then they have to change all sorts of stuff in it. And you have to make it up, perhaps. And that thing about, I think it was Degas saying about Corot that he grabbed a tree from somewhere else because he needed it for his composition. That's a real thing. But still, your setup ought to be predominantly quite pleasing, and it's in most ways that relate to painting. Before you start working on it, I'm just putting that out there as a high recommendation. One of those things that goes with the territory of being a still life painter, though. It's taught to you. Gamma would say it in so many words. You're only going to make your picture as beautiful as the setup itself. Why? Because you're just making it like that. You're not suddenly a creative soul that makes more greater beauty out of nothing, right? And in fact, the extraction of beauty from the data in front of you is really your job. It's not making up beauty. You're going to find yourself in a very predictable mode if you keep doing this made up beauty. If you find yourself stylizing, to find your kind of beauty in something. I don't mean the beauty that's already there. I mean the beauty that you just sort of invent as you go. And they have things like that aren't without value, but they have their place. Put it that way. Not the impressionist mindset typically. So now Dean Warren was the guy who wrote 24 Sittings with Edmund Tarbell, and he reflects on what Tarbell had to say. And he said this about Tarbell. He said, I think Mr. Tarbell meant to be excelled by no painter. To be excelled by no painter in his resolve to make his paintings look like the best appearance of the thing painted. While never photographic, is that accuracy? What is that? What is photographic? While never photographic, he certainly approved Bonnat's rule: make the painting as much like the model as possible, then make it still more like. And you've heard me quote that, of course, a bunch of times. So this is a very pleasing example of that exercise. And if you find this online and want to pull it up, there's a very high resolution version of this thing, and you can see how articulate his drawing is. His perspective looks good. His color relations, his light, his values. I mean, any way you want to think of that. Um, and significantly setting up something that has some fun things relating to each other. The pinks distributed through the picture and so on. So you set up something that has a little bit of that distinction of a picture that's organized, has organized color in it. As best as you can tell, it's better not to finally judge these pictures without the real thing in front of you. But that's his point. So make as much like the model as possible. Now, you could say that's a student exercise. Bonnat was a teacher at the Beaux-Arts, substitute, I guess, for Gérôme. But his rule, make the painting as much like the model as possible. Is that a student exercise? It certainly, as I've said before, the very beginning of what we do has got to be in being skilled at making a likeness, getting all the beauty of all the elements of something setting before you. That's your first base, right? That's the Antaeus story and all that. That's your grounding. Be good at that. And then what happens after that, right? It's interesting, huh? It's an interesting world that we start getting into. And excuse me, by the way, again, if you don't find me answering this precisely directly, I'm just giving you background data that relates to the Boston School on this subject and showing you pictures. De Camp said, paint straight and true like a Christian. What does that mean, straight and true? It has to mean the drawing, correct drawing, right? Correct color relation, the look of nature as it appears. Straight and true like a Christian. He's saying, don't try to fake people out. Don't be making it up. Don't think you can get away with that. Paint. Keep it simple, stupid sort of thing, Straight and true like a Christian. That's Joseph de Camp. And there are two excellent examples of that here. Now, does that mean he's worked up the detail? I've showed you many times before, the section. And all these things, as I said before, you can find on Wikimedia Comment or other places where they're really high resolution versions. Sometimes they're high resolution versions of bad images of these things, but this gives you a lot of sense. But you can see even though it's not complete in a little like closed in kind of modeling every little thing kind of a way, as I suggest Paxton more frequently does, it is accurate. You can see that the ovals look like they're right in their perspective that they create, and the form, this all looks like it's very, very accurate. The form of the woman, all the data related to all this stuff, everything looks accurate. It looks plausible. It looks true. Okay? There's those words, okay? Accurate and true. Accurate meaning it's a likeness of what's sitting in front of me. It looks like a very good bit of drawing. All his shapes are believable. And if you haven't worked a long time in front of nature painting from the life, your stuff is going to have all sorts of anomalies you don't even know exist. Problems. You have to work, put your time in, put your 10 years in. Because you really, minimally in terms of just the pure drawing part, make sure you've drawn on an everyday basis, drawn for 3 years. You're doing many other things too, and you can learn to draw while you're painting. There's no question about that. But make sure that's a key focus of your work is getting the relationships of angles to vertical, of getting sizes right to each other, getting distances, and the distances of things between, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The color relations, the truth of the color relations, having them well related in terms of color and chroma and value, darks, playing properly you can see the difference in the darks, the redness of this dark here and the colderness of this dark here, and a very different kind of a dark here. That stuff is the data that is accurate, you would say, except it's not a nice word in painting, is it? It's true, and it's definitely believable. And Our kind of painting, and in fact, any kind of painting, you have to be you have to be plausible. You have to look like you actually do know how to draw to be believable, right? Accurate. Don't know what that word is. Benson says to his daughter, "Those pretty colors mean nothing without good drawing and an interesting design." So, what is he saying? Right? What is he telling you here? Accurate. Those pretty colors. Now, pretty colors don't mean anything. It's the relational colors, the truth of the color relations. The fact that this value here is virtually, or this value here is virtually the same as that value. That's important. That's an important bit of data. That has to be true for the painting's atmosphere to reproduce itself, for it to be good drawing, shall we say, but good whatever in every way. So you can see the yellows relating to the yellows, to the other yellows. The whole world is his world is in the relation, the truth of the relationships. Well, that's what we talk about it. You'd say the accuracy, but again, accuracy, that's not a painting term. It's like saying to the poet, that poem isn't accurate. you you wouldn't be saying that. You wouldn't even say it to a novelist. You wouldn't say it's accurate. Now, a novelist, telling a story that is unbelievable, that's the equivalent of a guy trying to paint this kind of a picture who can't draw, who can't get the relationships you can't get the big forms right and the little ones right in relation to the big ones and all those things. That plausibility is a factor always in all the arts, right? In all the representational arts, which writing and painting are very strong on, the representational. Benson says, "My belief lies in this direction, that you should learn absolutely to see the thing as it exists." There's your word true again. As it exists. And then use that knowledge as you like. That's what some of you are looking for, but dig in deep, be really good. Dig out the truth, and you will find yourself in the midst of beauty, because you can't ultimately get the truth until you see how things relate, the beauty of how things relate, because that's what keeps you going when the oxygen gets thin. So if you can just pursue that, pursue the truth, but do it via the beauty, you'll find yourself living in rarefied air. My belief lies in this direction, that you should learn absolutely to see the thing truly as it exists, and then use that knowledge as you like. Now, see the thing means you can paint it to look like. That's what it means. Seeing it doesn't mean anything. You can say you see it, but we need to see evidence, okay? A man should use his knowledge of this, and express himself according to his inclination. So his knowledge of this, right? The world of the relationships, the world of color values, shape, form, and all those things. And then express himself according to his inclination. In other words, you have something you're setting up even that nobody else will set up like that. That's part of your inclination in the first place. But then if you set it up and you got this magical thing going and you don't know how to hit the notes accurately, and again, what is that word? But to get the truth of the relationships, to get the magic which is in the truth of the relationship. But beneath everything should be the solid foundation of reality. Okay? That doesn't mean realism. Look at this picture. That's not realism in today's way of thinking. In fact, even in those days' way of thinking, people were doing these noodly things with all sorts of high levels of detail, further and further detail. They don't wind up in the annals, do they? They don't wind up in the great chambers or the great museums. I've been I worked for a restorer, and we would sometimes get some paintings like that I would look at and think, wow. And some painting, done at the same time as Jerome and those guys. And it would be so amazing, the fineness of every single hair noodled up. I'm talking about before photography. And I used to think, well, why isn't that it? But, it's like many other ways this works. It falls away in your mind. It doesn't hold up as being the thing. So there's a kind of what is that kind of an accuracy? Is that just simply the littleness of the pursuit of data for its own sake, or for the realism per se? When, of course, the point of painting isn't realism, it's just the underpinning, right? Benson says, look at the shapes of the lights and shadows. I tell you all, it's about the value units. If you recognize value units and can make the shape of a value unit, you're going to have this game well in hand. Look at the shapes of the lights and the shadows. Put them down flat, and flat again means put them down without lots of the little details. Make them exactly the shapes they are without detail and leave them. Don't puddle around with leaves and branches. Make the shadows right in relation to each other, near in value, and only when you have that done right, put in details. As much or as little as you like, that's not important. So you're getting now what he's talking about here. So is that accuracy when you're leaving out details? And you'll see in all the great masters, that's what happens. They aren't executing by means of details. In fact, Degas says it's not the details at all that give you the ending, it's the harmony. I can stop the painting when everything is in harmony. Woo. That's the other model, right? That's the beauty model. And then he says, paint exact shapes. Oh, accurate shapes? Whatever, if you like. Paint exact shapes. Yeah, interesting. And you're looking at a painting like this. Have you all seen this painting? I don't know if I've ever shown it to you. I really love this one, the lily pads. These are all from Benson, almost all of them going forward. You'll always get into trouble unless you design all the time you're painting. Stop designing and you're in trouble. Well, that's the relational world. Design is what this does to that, and that to this, and that to that, and how it all hangs together into a unity, which is what you have to have your eye on the whole time. How all these things are interplaying with all these other things, right? And you heard me talk about many varieties of those kinds of things. So I might just to give you one example would be maybe in sort of to see the stringiness of this and how it relates to this when you have kindred elements, those guys are all in a function together. Even these guys in their interplay, doing different things all through the picture, they're all hanging together, but they're creating a great deal of variety in the way they're sometimes lit more golden with light hitting, sometimes bluer, and the variety of the turns of these notches are in different angles. etc. But all that stuff, but watching and how it all hangs together. So the size of this is a drawing problem, how it relates to the size of this, how much rounder this is and flatter that one is, which gives you the perspective. These are all the things that we're talking about. Stop designing. Well, that's part of the design, but design's fun, and that word it's intrinsically tied to the word drawing in French. Which I like. Okay, you're so fascinated with painting, he says to his daughter, with making the thing to look like reality that you forget to design. The things themselves should be made only at the end. Till then, concentrate only on the values and the relationships of color and space. I assume by space he means distances, by the way. Space meaning like from here to here, But that's one of those things you may not. You can see I'm just saying that. Do I know that? There are things in all these quotes where you might have to speculate a bit. Helps to be clearer, to be nearer to these people. In having somebody like Gamel around, or being in Boston, seeing a lot of their work, you get to know things that are helpful. He then follows up with, look continuously at the whole picture, not at parts, and roam from place to place making adjustments. That's what painting is, making adjustments. Don't look at one part too long. You'll paint it too much in detail. Here's the quote I'm trying to isolate. The unimportant parts of a picture should not be minutely described so that they will attract notice. Do the values and let it go. Everyone, all of us, tries to get an effect by carefully describing an object. That's not the way it's done. Go back again and again, I can't say it often enough, to the effect of things when you're looking at the whole picture. Anything is important which increases the effect of light and shade. That light streak on the tablecloth, for instance, emphasizes the shadow which the instrument casts across the table. Always keep in mind the direction from which the light is coming. We're talking about the facts of the light in the picture right in front of you. And the fact that objects are casting their shadows across the table, even if barely perceptible. This will help you to select the things that are of significance. Now, I'm going to suggest blurring the eye is probably as big as anything, darkening the eye as anything when it comes to trying to figure out the significance. What makes it significant, right? It's high readability. So, and then he goes on, the things that are important. I couldn't find a great shot of this picture. I wish I could. It's the best one I could find. The things that are important are the correct relations of one thing to another. The hair, the shadow, the reflection, the halftones, etc. Until you have these values right, it's absolutely no use going ahead with anything else. And I would say the word color values would be in some ways a better word because it matters in both cases. The color has to be right. The chroma of that color has to be right. And then the values, of course, too. But here he says composition, drawing, values, color, not local color, edges, above all, values, how the light falls. Keep comparing everything else with the darkest spot. That's about accuracy, right? That's about accuracy. You got the darkest spot and you make sure everything, and then with the lightest, you're comparing everything the darkest up with the lightest. Draw shapes carefully. That's not finishing. Oh, carefully, but that doesn't mean to get them noodled up so they're more carefully made, but their shape is more what? You'd probably say the word accurate, right? Don't paint objects, paint only values. So I talk about value units. Painting is done as value units. You're not painting objects. This is a white value unit right here. And if you can keep your mind investing that way, think about value units, you're going to find painting goes really better and faster. I'd say it's value units and what happens where they meet other ones. So value units and what happens where it meets the dark one, or where it meets out here, or where it meets out here, where it meets a whole different one. But even the face here, maybe in both faces, I don't know, but at least this all is all a value unit. It's a value unit, and keeping that awareness of how that's all hanging together. Again, that's the way this picture looks here. I wish I had a better reproduction. But you can understand, though, that what he's saying, the reason I'm reading this stuff is because he's talking about the accuracy. You're comparing everything else, the values of everything, with what you've concluded are the darkest spots and the lightest spots. So you've set a table, and you're living in the accuracy of the relationships given that. And painting is always doing that, by the way. It's true, you're keying. So you're saying, what's my darkest dark? So he might have said, let this be my darkest dark, or this over here, or both of them. He set them there. Now, everything he does after that is looking at this, looking at you, baby. There you go. And this sets something in here as his lightest light. It might have been a glow here or something, whatever. He might have said, and again, this picture, I wish it was better because this doesn't quite look like the painting. But you see that it's all about trying to be true, to true it up. To true it up, that's what we mean. And you're not going to get an impressionist a field of color relation, of light, atmosphere, and all that stuff, unless you can true up your colors to each other, the chroma of those colors, the values of those colors to each other in that big field, right? And by the way, by field, we mean the whole thing, including the people. We don't mean the field out there. If you can get the color relations of this field, and by the way, I really recommend you do it without drawing for a while. So you can see how much you don't do well, because if you really do color relations well, you're going to think, what do I even need drawing for? I mean, if you really do it beautifully, you're going to realize what color's got. That extension of realism, you're going to realize it. There you go. And Benson says, a skillful man will seem to be making things at the same time, right? As he's doing the stuff we just talked about. But really, if he's good, he'll be only painting the relations of things. Now, things that we're painting the relations of, he's not talking about the relations of these girls to each other, okay? He's talking about the colors and the values and the effects. So, the relations of things. You think you do, but you've got to do it entirely differently if you were to get a real effect. Careful drawing of shapes is not making things. Draw very carefully the fine shape of a handsome tree or object. Take plenty of time and draw it well, not easy to do. And yet he still says careful drawing of shapes is not making things. It's not making things. He's telling you to carefully draw the shapes, but that doesn't mean this is a shape. You should get it right, this shape. But you're not drawing a head of a girl's hair. That's not what you're doing. Would you believe that? You need to start believing that if you want to walk into that realm that Monet sets up in the Twilight Zone, shall we say. That Monet sort of sets up. It starts a whole new ballgame. But one of the things I like about this reproduction, which is a fun one, is if you're looking at a pink like this one down here, or any of the other colors in here, you'll see them tending to pick up or be extensions of or be sisters of other colors throughout the painting. And that's the very nature of the unity of the big impression. So you have something that looks good. Your job, in a sense, as an impressionist, and you can do this with your own still lifes in your studio, your job is to study them up and gradually bring yourself to understanding to understanding your composition, to understanding the source of the beauty. If you're seeing notes like this and following the advice of Paxton, if you hit a note somewhere down here and you while it's in your brush, you look around and see where else it is, you're talking about that relationship, that unity thing. He might have grabbed it some and just stuck it a little bit up here, right? This might have been one of his lead notes. It's seriously dark, and it's one of the richest darks. And so it might have been a lead note, and he might have been using it all over the place. Anyway, yeah. But that's interesting to say it. He's almost saying it backwards. Careful drawing of shapes is not making things. That isn't making things. Okay. But so what you are making, though, is the edge over here and the look of nature at this edge, and you're comparing it. You're relating it to other edges. The ones are the same and ones that are different. So you're looking at this thing here. You'll see that this is the leading edge on this, or maybe it's leading edge. Maybe this is the leading one. But you'll see that these kinds of edges are the lead, and these kinds are secondary or even lost edges. There's this whole world of those kinds of relations. That's what we're drawing, and no different, no more so than, or none other than if you were talking the same Monet language. You see a triangle of blue here, you see an oblong of green there. We're talking in a very similar kind of a way here. That's the nature of what this has all come to. All the way back as far as Ruskin, and I think even before that, people were saying that that you had to learn to see with a naive eye. But the naive eye, you're still looking at the stuff, and you see darker, lighter. You see what happens where things meet. You see different chromas dancing through a picture and all that. Here's one of those early ones where he decided to start getting thick painting. He painted a handful of, I believe, these still lifes fairly early on in his career. Benson says distinction can't be achieved by spelling words. Okay, that's what he's saying. Noodling up an object. That's the equivalent of just spelling the word out. By doing each half inch meticulously and perfectly. Okay, see what he's saying there? But he's talking about distinction, right? Never do anything without regard to expressing the whole, the spirit. Now, there's again this idea of what is accuracy if it's not about the accuracy of the spirit of the whole, right? And how do you measure that kind of accuracy? How do you paint that? Can you paint that piecemeal? It's much more elusive than that and way more magical and more fun because of it, right? More like poetry because of it, okay? Never do anything without regard to expressing the whole, the spirit. Your drawing must be better than pretty good. It must be distinctively done. Drawing is only learned by long, hard practice. You can't learn it quickly, and you won't learn it quickly. Drawing is always hard. You always have to work at it, even after 40 years. If he's talking that way, what drawing is he talking about? He's got to be talking about the drawing is what? Drawing the thing sitting in front of you. That's all it is. If you can just make it up as you go, and you don't have to be very accurate, that's not hard. Okay? Very accurate. There I am. I'm using your word now. I'm totally sucked in. Yeah. Put down the things strongly that indicate the nature and character of an object. So that's, you see where he's talking about that very much like that putting that down strongly and getting the nature and character of that. Look for the significant things. Now, I always say that in any given area, you have a bird like this, there's some part of him, maybe it's this, that's more significant than anything else. Significant in what way? Well, it's significant, like it reads better than other things, that sort of thing. It gives it the significance. It's got a game to play to the larger picture. It makes it more important, right? It doesn't mean it signifies more. But so if you know, no matter where you are, there's a certain part of, say, this bird that's going to have more to do, or whatever organ is going to have more to do and more to do in the setting up of the grand play, which is what gives it its significance in any given area. So, but every unit you ever see has got parts that are more significant and less significant. I sometimes call them platoon leaders. You guys have been with me, know that. In every area, you have that guy who's before all the other guys, and you use that guy for reference when you're talking about the whole. So look at the significant things. Don't paint and model each little detail. Now, you're talking about a way of painting where we work from the greater to the lesser. We're really working from the grand aspects of the composition, the big impression, meaning the strong guys and how they dance to each other. If your picture was the stuff, that would be there still. If your picture was sitting there in a darkened room, that's the stuff. Millet, Ang, talk about that. Your picture has to look good. Well, that's the first wave. So if you blur your eyes down, what's important here? You can see if you blur your eyes down, this is significantly important. There's something about that. But there's something about a handful of these guys that are more important than all the rest of them, right? Now, nothing is unimportant. That's not what I mean to say. But I'm saying that if you're designing a picture, you base it on those guys that are strong, easy to see, and significant in the sense of what they do to set up the grand whole. Okay. So don't paint and model each little detail, but put down in proper value and warmth or coolness of color the salient and characteristic lines. Now that idea, remember what de Camp said. It's just the right color, the right value in the right place. Easy to understand, hard to do. But he says here, but this is like it. And I said, don't you notice that he's saying color and values before he says drawing? So Benson is now doing the same thing. He says, put down in proper value and warmth or coolness of color the salient and characteristic lines. So you find the color and you and you reproduce the characteristic lines with those things, okay? We'll leave that one. So this is what the most honest of the modernists are trying for. The plain fact does not interest them. You could say that would be like in the class of the accuracy, and it's not truth for the sake of the reality of the thing in front of you. They say, I will not say D-O-G smells dog. This is what he's talking about, the modernists, by the way. Let's start that again. This is what the most honest of the modernists are trying to do. The plain fact does not interest them. They say, I will not say D-O-G spells dog, because that's stupid and literal. So they make something else, liberate themselves to say the same thing in another more interesting way. But the other is less honest. Merely look at the fact of liberation, do not understand what they were liberated for, and merely think that they can make anything and call it art. They're not happy about it, don't enjoy what they do. The modernists think they're inventing something new every day. Men's minds don't work that way. By the way, Degas says painting doesn't expand. It isn't becoming something else. It keeps returning to itself. The modernists think they're inventing something new every day. Men's minds don't work that way. Every invention is based on completeness. You might say, I invented something. I merely noticed and painted an aspect of nature that had escaped other men's observation. Now, there are hundreds of men who do the same thing, more or less well, according to their real knowledge. But you can see what that is. It's an argument against things like bad drawing or whatever drawing, right? You just draw something and you see something there and then you mess with something else. And, by the way, I don't have any problem with people who work any which way they want and do whatever they want. I'm not a judge of that. I'm just saying, well, we are as representational painters. You know how I'm thinking about that. It's our particular form. And a representational painter is drawing forth the beauty out of the data, out of the data that's in front of them, the true data. They're drawing, in a sense, drawing it out of the truth, right? So it's extracting the beauty from what's right in front of them. Now, Dean Warren again, talking about Tarbell and the 24 sittings, which, by the way, the 24 sittings and the advice of Benson are both available to you. Just go to my website. I think you can just grab them there. And if you don't find them there, just email me and I'll send them to you. But they're just there, they're free. Mr. Tarbell's painting, so this is from 24 sittings, yes. Mr. Tarbell's painting, whatever the subject, indoors or out, inanimate or living, dog, horse, or man, seems to me, and remember, this is coming from conversations of the sittings he had. He was a portrait sitter for Tarbell for 24 sittings, conversing every single day. Seems to me, he said, so whatever the subject, seems to me to have had one controlling purpose. He always meant to represent some real thing as he saw it, both at first glance and after searching study. He never left a difficulty to itself and called the result self-expression. One day he said of a certain important edge, I've drawn it 20 times. Any of the 19 condemned efforts could have passed as self-expression. But his standard was objective. Did the edge of the area look as it appeared in the model? Now, that is That's a telling thing because that almost implies that he's just simply a realist. And in one sense, of course, he is. But the need for the thing to be true, for it to have the look as it appeared in the model, is because of the role it played in the composition with that look. So he wasn't trying to make it do a accuracy for accuracy's sake. He was actually doing it. If he's a painter, if he's an artist, he's actually doing it because of the composition. But the accuracy and the composition are so marvelously tied together. Benson makes that so clear. Again, in his writing, it becomes really, really clear. You need to really think about that part of it, though. But it's the interrelationships of the data of a beautiful thing that gives it its charm, And so you have to be an accuracy-minded person. You have to get the relationships good in relation. You have to get things really good in relationships to each other. The truth of the relationships is a common expression, but the greatest truth we have is in the relationships, not in the fact of one color or another. That's why I argue against the site size model, because you can get one spot exactly like nature and you can't do it with another spot. It doesn't matter. It's not going to make the picture better to have one of those right. I used to think it might, given that I was working with Gemmell. But in fact, the beauty of our pictures is because of the inherent interrelatedness, and you might say the unity of the stuff. Okay, the way it relates is what gives it its beauty, and so it's a color thing, it's a line thing. The lines of these trees and their interplay. It's searching out its own harmony. He's finding the harmony in these things, and he might even be leaving branches out that are destroying a harmony that he's found, the larger harmony. That's an interesting thought, isn't it? Of course, there's a harmony in here that's true, though. He's not inventing it. He's not tarbalizing it into his own kind of personal harmony. He's extracting it. He's seeing beauty in this thing, yes, with his own eyes. And he's extracting it based on what his conclusions are about the beauty of the interrelationships that made by, what should we say, made by the facts of nature, made by, their reality, their truth. So he gets them right in relation to each other, and the music starts. Notes. I like that one. So I think that's what we have to offer you today. Just something to think about. Going back to the original query, or such as it was. Maybe there's more than a query. It was more of a point. Thanks. I'm sorry. In a related sense, you could also explain the difference between. Could you also explain the difference between searching for the truth and being accurate in impressionist use of the terms? So, I believe in that last picture, you get a much better idea of the truth we're searching for. It's the truth that sets up this beauty that's thrilled you, right? Now, it doesn't mean the truth of the accuracy in a photographic sense. We're not pursuing the thing like we have to prove that we know how to make an accuracy, right? We have to accurately portray the beauty that made us even want to be in that room. And that requires, a very disciplined mind and routine behaviors of finding relational, of correlating relational data. So maybe that does it. Maybe that's noteworthy. Enjoy, guys. Hey, I want to thank you again, Adra B. and Lauren K., the Painted Trout, that Lauren K., and Ollie for your exciting contributions that help us along our way here, keeping it coming. And I especially thank you guys under the comments under the last one about the note makes the music video that we did last week. I really appreciate that, those sweet comments. And I hope the rest of all of you guys have a great week painting. But keep, if you wouldn't mind, subscribe, share, hit the like button, comment, especially comment, because I rely on you, like I just relied on our friend whose name I forgot, Douglas, to call forth something. I love conversing about these things. But I'd love it even more if it's something that means something to you, so we can really be communicating. All right, take care. See you in the next one. Hope you have a great week.